Good afternoon, everyone. So today we are beginning Mishnah 4. This Mishnah is from Rabbi Shimon, who is more familiar as Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai, very well known, one of the sages. I'm just going to share with you the screen. Here we go. So this is kind of a follow-up to the last Mishnah. The last Mishnah we talked about people sitting together and either yes or not sharing words of Torah. There it was talking about two people. This Mishnah is Rabbi Shimon Omer. Rabbi Shimon says, Shalosha she'ochlu al shulchan echad. Three guys, three people sitting on one table, eating. That three people who ate at one table. V'lo amru alav divrei Torah, and they did not say any words of Torah over it while they were there. It's ki'ilu achlu mizivchei mesim. It's as if they are eating from the sacrifices, literally of the dead, but it means of idol worship. Shenemar, and there's a verse that says in Yeshayahu and Isaiah, Ki kol shulchanos malu ki tzoa b'li makom. All these tables are filled with, it says vomit and filth, without space, without room. Is referring a very negative aspect to these offerings made for idolatry. Okay, so we have this idea that three people eating at a table. So one of the things about three at a table is we know that when it comes to Birkat Hamazon, if three people have a meal together, so there's a difference between three and less than three, and namely that when three people are together, you can have what's called a mezuman, in that one person sort of leads and says Rabbatayna Varech, etc., and the others respond. And that law is such that they're actually required to do so. If three people are eating together, they're not only are allowed to, but they're obligated to have this mezuman, and therefore one cannot leave until you can't just leave and leave the other two hanging. You have to wait until they're finished, technically, and do it, which means that in our perspective, if three people are eating together, then most likely they wanted to eat together. Like if you could have, sometimes you could have one person eating by himself, two people eating together, and you're doing a quick thing. If three people are sitting down, then they understand that there's this idea that they're going to have to Birkat Hamazon, and they're going to have it, say it together, in which case they recognize that they're there for a while. That this is not a eat and run type of job, in which case there should be some words of Torah that are said. Interestingly, according to some opinions brought down by the Rabbar Tanura, saying Birkat Hamazon in and of itself counts as words of Torah. So according to many, just the fact that you've said Birkat Hamazon, that fulfills the obligation here to say words of Torah. Another thing about when the table is, we find the table is compared to Mizbeach, to an altar. So at the altar is someplace holy. So again, at the table, to saying words of Torah is recognizing that since you're sitting in front of God. The other idea that is brought down is that in the Birkat Hamazon, we mentioned that it could fulfill our obligation. So we know that the different blessings of the Birkat Hamazon are actually said by different people historically, going way back to the time of Moshe. That the first bracha was Moshe. Moshe represents Torah, and the second bracha was Yehoshua, and that's the beginning of the book of the Nevi'im, the book of the prophets. That was the first book of the prophets, and the third bracha was from King David and King Solomon, and they are the beginning of the books of writings, or they're from the books of writings. So you have the Tanakh, the Torah, Nevi'im, Kesuvim, represented in Birkat Hamazon. Some say that is it. However, again, we are obligated to say Birkat Hamazon. So many opinions would say, well, that's not doing anything extra at the table. The Tiferes Yisrael, interesting, says, if you say here in the Hebrew, Shlosha she'achlu, three that ate, that's past tense, as opposed to three that are eating. And he says that when you're eating, we know that if a person talks while they're eating, then you could end up choking. So therefore, we're not talking about doing this while you're eating. We're talking about after you've stopped eating. Because while you're eating, you shouldn't be talking at the same time as you're eating your food. and therefore it's after you ate. And the idea being that you are going to not put yourself in danger as well, because we know it can be dangerous. And then he also points out that everyone who's there, should offer some type of connection to Torah based on their ability. And also gives us the understanding that you're at a meal, but we're putting an importance to the meal, because why do we eat? So a person eats to live, right? As opposed to living to eat. We have to understand our priorities. If all we're doing is saying, oh, I want to have good food for the sake of the good food, then that's not a higher purpose, and that's in a sense like living to eat. However, we understand that the purpose of eating is in order for us to strengthen ourselves. And therefore, when we are speaking Torah at a meal, then we're showing that the meal is not just for the purpose of pleasure, but rather is a higher purpose to it. And we're not just animals, but we're human beings, and we have a higher level. And again, the idea of eating is in order to have strength, in order to be able to do mitzvahs, to be able to serve God. Okay, the Irving Bunim points out another idea, which again, the idea of the table, and is the place of the Mizbeach. And there he says the food represents the concept of the offering, and we're eating the food in order that Hashem has provided for us, in order for us to be healthy, right? In order to be able to serve Hashem better. Now, when many times when we're having meals, we invite other people, right? So when we invite other people to partake with us. So in that way, not only are we having the food for ourselves, but we're also using it to help other people as well. And again, as a mizbeach, as an altar, we sanctify the table through the words of Torah. And he says that this represents the three ideas of Torah, Avoda, and Gemilut Chasadim that we've spoken about many times in Pirkei Avos, the three pillars. And he also relates to, there are three types of leaders. He goes, there's a Chacham, the wise person, the Kohen, who's also a conceptual leader, and a Navi, the prophet. And the Chacham is the wisdom, that represents Torah. The Kohen is the one who does the service, that's Avodah. And the Navi represents Chesed, doing things for others. And that's what's happening at a meal. Because at the meal, when we are inviting other people, we're performing chesed. Therefore, we fill that one. When we make the brachos, and we make blessings over food, so now we're making the food into an offering. We're not just eating for the sake of eating, but we're eating with a higher purpose, and it becomes like an offering. So that's avodah. And finally, when we say the words of Torah, so then we're like the Chacham, and we are now infusing that angle of Torah as well. So a meal in and of itself is not just a meal, but it becomes, in a sense, the pillar of what the world stands on. We have to be able to have Torah, Avoda, and Gemilut Chasadim in a meal by partaking of it with the right reasons, inviting other people to join us, and by reciting words of Torah. And we'll hold it there. Have a great day, everyone.